When we think of most summer blockbuster film franchises, whether it be Jurassic World, Mission Impossible, or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the thing that we most often think of when those films first come to mind is their large-scale spectacle, which usually comes in the form of action sequences. The Planet of the Apes franchise is one of the biggest exceptions to this, as action has rarely ever been the major draw of the films, with most of the excitement usually forming around the characters and world building. Despite this, the Apes franchise has still managed to deliver a handful of exciting and beloved action scenes throughout the past several decades, and I'm here to give you my top 10. If you like what I do here and want to show your support, be sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things Apes. Enjoy the video. And welcome back to Ape Nation, your #1 source for all things Planet of the Apes on YouTube. My name is Josh, and today I am counting down my top 10 favorite action scenes from the entire Planet of the Apes movie franchise. As I mentioned up top, these movies have never been well known for their action scenes. While there are definitely some great ones that I'm going to get to in just a minute, most of us love these movies for everything around the action. The unique and compelling characters, the endlessly fascinating world, the complex and thought-provoking themes and parallels to our own world, and of course, the always impressive special effects, both practical and digital. Still, among all of those elements of this franchise that we love, we've still managed to get some excellent, intense, even iconic action sequences between all of it, and now I'm going to get into the ones that I think are the very best. So, with all of that out of the way, let's get started. Coming in at number 10 on my list is going to be The Apes versus Taylor and Brent from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. This is one of the final scenes in the entirety of Beneath the Planet of the Apes. In fact, it's actually pretty much the ending of Beneath the Planet of the Apes. And I love this scene because it is so shockingly and effectively violent in a way that most of the rest of the franchise isn't. There is another scene that's much more violent, but I'll get to that much later on this list. It's also one of the most chaotic scenes in the entire franchise. Just seeing these two humans and Ursus's army just come to a head and having an all-out shootout and war and battle with each other, just tearing each other apart moments before the earth finally explodes and the world comes to an end. It's full of chaos, and because of that, I think it's such a perfectly fitting final moment to precede the ending of the film.
Bloody bastard.
It perfectly encapsulates the state of the world of human-ape politics during the final moments of the original Planet of the Apes timeline. I love it. It's a great action sequence. It's tense, it's insane, it's brutal, and I think it's fantastic. And so for that reason, it is going at number 10. Coming in at number 9 on my list is Taylor's escape from 1968's Planet of the Apes. There is tension throughout this entire scene, from the moment that Taylor escapes his cell all the way until the big line that wraps it all up. It is full of suspense. It's so much fun. There are also multiple little moments that aid in building out the world of Planet of the Apes through the action. You have Taylor sneaking through the apes, I guess you'd call it their church, their religious service that is going on. You have him running through the ape common market where they're all hanging out. You have him sneaking through that museum where we get to see little artifacts here and there. It's also just fun to watch as we root for Taylor's escape, while also seeing everything around him, getting to explore this world and all that existing within a really thrilling, really enjoyable, but also really tense overall chase scene. And it builds so successfully to one of, if not the most iconic lines in the entire movie. It's a great sequence. It's one of my favorite moments every time I watch the movie. And so that is why it is at number 9.
Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
Coming in at number 8 is going to be the human hunt / May chase sequence from Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I love this scene for a number of reasons, one of which being it is, I think, a perfect homage to the original film and feels like a successfully modernized version of the original human hunt in terms of visuals and music, but it doesn't feel forced and it fits so naturally into this world that they've created in Kingdom, and it brings a more heightened and fast-paced intensity of action to the franchise that we had never really seen up to this point. We've seen action scenes that are fun, that are intense, that are really dark, that are really full of suspense, but this I feel like is taking things to much more of a modern action level. It's much faster paced, it's much more intense, it's much more heightened reality in a way, and so I really like that they brought that to the franchise with this sequence. And also the emotional engagement in May and in Noah I think is very effectively used as May is being chased and is fearing for her life, and you get that sense from the start of the scene all the way to the end, and it keeps that tension high on a very consistent level. And like a lot of these other scenes, it culminates in a very big moment, which I think is one of the biggest moments of the movie, with May revealing that she can speak, and that leads directly into the next part of the story as she makes her way away from the gorilla, which is another little mini sequence in and of itself of Silva running after her at full speed as she makes her way onto Noah's horse and they take off. I think it's a great scene, it's full of intensity, and that is why it is number 8 on my list. Coming in at number 7 is going to be Taylor versus Brent from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. This is a really cool, really interesting sequence that I don't think gets talked about quite enough. This is one of, in fact, I think it actually is the single only one-on-one human fistfight that we've ever seen in the entire franchise. Not saying that's a good or bad thing, I just think it's really interesting. It's also just incredibly brutal to watch. These two are going at each other and it looks like they could kill each other at any moment with how hard they're going at each other and how brutal they are fighting. It's almost harrowing to watch at times, and it's one of the most violent moments from the original series and the franchise in general. And it also just is very fitting for the themes of the movie that heavily revolve around the destructive nature of man and how humans destroy themselves, which is very prevalent throughout, especially those first two movies. It's a great scene. It's really, really brutal. I think it's one of the more memorable moments from that entire movie, and so for that reason, I have it at number 7. Coming in at number 6 on my list is going to be the Eagle Village Attacked from Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Something I really like about this scene, and I felt this way from the very first time I saw it, is that it really does a great job in setting the bar for intensity of action within the first 30 minutes of the movie that is then continued throughout the rest of the movie anytime we do get those action beats. It's also, I think, a very stunning combination and use of camera work and visuals with several small intense action beats throughout. They all help in creating one large, really scary, action-packed scene that is heart-stopping from the first second to the last and sets the stage for the story to come and the stakes that are coming with that story. So it's a great scene, it's a great way to kick off the story, it's a great action sequence in and of itself, and for that reason it is going at number 6.
For Caesar! For Caesar!
Coming in at number 5 would be The Human Hunt from the original Planet of the Apes from 1968. I know some people might have this a bit higher, but for me, I think top 5 is perfectly fine. And I think it deserves that spot because it is one of the most iconic scenes of the entire franchise. And it's also just one of the most iconic scenes in film in general. The tension rises from the moment you hear that horn blown all the way to Taylor's capture at the end. That moment where you see the apes for the first time is iconic in and of itself. I also think something that helps really sell it are the human actors throughout. Even if they're just extras, the intensity of what's happening and how scary it all is really sold by just how frantic and how animalistic those actors are with just trying to get away any way they can. And I think the music from Jerry Goldsmith perfectly captures the pure insanity of the scene. The camera work is great. The tall grass setting really helps bring it all together and raise the stakes and raise that intensity, raise that realism in a way. And so it's an iconic sequence sequence. I love it. It's one of my favorite moments in the movie, and so that is why it is at number 5. Coming in at number 4 on my list is going to be Caesar versus Koba from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. This is, as far as I know, the only ending in the franchise that actually features a one-on-one fight between the hero and the villain of the story. Again, one of these things that I don't think is good or bad, I just think it's really interesting. And something that I also think is really interesting about this sequence is the choreography. When you look at this scene just on the surface level, you might just say, oh, it's two CGI chimpanzees punching each other, but it's actually much deeper and a lot more clever than that. It's really well thought out, and it's actually designed in a way that fits the characters. Caesar is strategizing throughout the entire fight, finding ways to tire out Koba. Meanwhile, Koba is just full of uncontrolled rage and constantly swinging and punching and going after Caesar without any sort of thought behind it, which eventually gets to the point where Caesar is able to overpower him and take him down pretty easily. Something I also love about this scene is you just don't want either character to die. At least I don't. I know others feel differently, but I just feel helpless when I watch this scene and almost sad as you watch two former best friends, practically brothers, going at each other, tearing each other apart. It's a really tragic scene in a way, and it also just has such an epic build up to the scene before they go at it, with tension that's cranked up high from start to finish, and it's just a beyond satisfying ending that all leads to Koba's death, with Caesar being fully cemented as the Moses-like figure that we now know and love him to be. It's an epic fight, it's an epic showdown, it's an awesome action sequence, and that is why it is at number 4 on my list. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Caesar's Ape Uprising from Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. This is by far the most violent moment in the entire franchise, to the point that if this had been released today, or even if it had been released like 2 decades later, this would easily have been an R-rated movie. It is so gory, it is so over the top, almost to a level that some might think it's a little too much, but I love that about it. It's so effective, and I think what makes it so effective is that it is the only one in the franchise that is this violent, which just drives the point of the story home and drives the themes of that story home, of what Caesar's going through, with that final sequence also just being so eerily reminiscent of real world riots, specifically the civil rights riots, in a way that no film has ever really captured in the Planet of the Apes franchise. It's so harrowing to watch, but it also feels incredibly satisfying, and it feels like a giant exhale after Caesar's rage-fueled inhale of the first 2 acts of the movie. It never once gets dull, and it's a snowball effect of intensity from start to finish that all leads to the big speech at the very end of the movie. It's an incredible sequence of events. The raw, intense, brutal, bloody violence is so effective, and it stands out as one of the most iconic, most memorable, in my opinion, most important action set pieces in the entire Planet of the Apes franchise, and really just sci-fi and franchise films in general. It's so incredibly well done. I love it to death. It is the highlight of the entire film all the way to the very end, and for that reason, it is number 3 on my list.
I, a descendant of slaves, am asking you to show humanity.
But I was not born human.
I know. The child of the evolved apes.
Whose children shall rule the earth.
For better or for worse.
Coming in at number 2 is going to be The Apes Attack the Humans from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Something that I think does a great job in separating this scene from any other in the franchise, and really just a lot of other blockbuster action scenes, is that it's so somber and it's not exciting, it's not fun, but it's still epic and it's still incredible to watch. But at its core, it's one of the most somber action scenes that I've ever seen in a big franchise film. It has spectacularly shot and choreographed action, which creates such a stark contrast with that haunting and sad tone of the scene, but it works so effectively well. It's really, really powerful, and it has some really brilliant visual storytelling within the action. It's as epic as it is horrifying to watch, and it's probably the most well-crafted and thematically thought-provoking action scene in the entire franchise. Not to mention, it also has this iconic shot of Koba coming into a tank, killing the people inside, throwing them out, and then taking over over the tank to ram into a building, all in one single take, and it is one of the coolest and most well done shots I think that the franchise has ever seen. It's a phenomenal action sequence, it's a brutal action sequence, it's a depressing action sequence, but it's also one of the most memorable action sequences in the entirety of Planet of the Apes, and so that is why it comes in for me at number 2. And finally, coming in at number 1 on my list, and a lot of you probably could have already guessed this if you either watched my top 10 favorite moments from Planet of the Apes video or just by noticing that I haven't mentioned it yet, but my number 1 favorite action scene in the Planet of the Apes franchise, and it wasn't even close, it never has been for me, is the battle on the Golden Gate Bridge from Rise of the Planet of the Apes. To me, this is in the pantheon of epic third acts, such as films like the first Avengers or the original Star Wars with the trench run sequence. It's as perfect of a third act action finale, at least in my opinion, as you could ever ask for. It is so emotionally charged by Caesar's journey, keeping you fully engaged from the moment the apes make it to the bridge all the way until their grand triumph over the police, escaping into the woods at the very end. The way that the different ape species are used and strategized is really clever and so much fun to watch. Patrick Doyle's music gives it that extra level of emotional weight and excitement. And like some of these other scenes, there are just so many iconic moments throughout the entire scene. Caesar riding on a horse for the first time, Caesar assembling the apes and organizing where they're each gonna go, Buck running after that cop on horseback and taking him down, Buck's sacrifice and saving Caesar and dying as a result, Koba killing Jacobs at the end. There are just so many moments within this one massive action set piece that I always come back to when I think of my favorite moments in Planet of the Apes, and especially in the Caesar trilogy. From the beginning to the end, it's just such an endlessly thrilling and, to me, very rewatchable action sequence. I love it so much. It is so much fun. It is so emotional. It's so exciting. I could just watch it again and again on a loop. Maybe it's not the most thought-provoking or deepest action scene, but for me, it is just something that I have so much fun with it. I get so emotionally involved in, and for that reason, it is the number 1 action scene on my list. So guys, those were my top 10 favorite action scenes from all across the Planet of the Apes movies. I had a lot of fun looking back and rewatching all of these scenes, as well as a few others that didn't quite make the list. I think all of these hold up strong and could easily go toe-to-toe with dozens and dozens of other big blockbuster films and action that we get from them. The action is not necessarily one of the reasons I love this franchise, so the fact that there are still this many scenes worth discussing and getting excited about is all the more impressive for the franchise as a whole. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you agree with my list and think most of these scenes would be on your top 10? Or are there any that I'm forgetting about that you think are just as worthy Planet of the Apes action scenes? I want to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you so much for checking out today's video here on Ape Nation. If you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button. You can also now join the Ape Nation Discord server for daily discussions about the franchise, and if you're interested in seeing more of my videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date on all things apes. I'll catch you in the next one, so until then, goodbye.